good, right, Mr. Haber? And we listed 6 types of fuels that are no good. And the issue with the wicks, if the wick is not a good wick, it will not draw the oil properly to the, it won't draw the oil properly, and therefore there's a concern that it's going to go out. The fire is going to, or it's going to get weak, and you might come to adjust the fire, and therefore you got to make sure that it says the following. It says the wicks that the rabbi said you can't light with. It says it's because the light, the fire doesn't hold well on the wick. So I want to change. I want it like this. When it comes to the oils that they said that you can't use, because if the oil does not have such good material, good morning, Simon, then the oil will not go, the wick won't draw the oil properly. That's the problem with the oil. Inferior quality of the oil, the problem is that oil won't go up the wick properly. The wick won't draw it. And inferior quality wick means that when you light that wick is not going to catch properly. And the fire will flickery, right? It will skip, it will jump off, it won't burn. Therefore, it's not going to burn well. If the wick doesn't catch if the wick doesn't catch well, if the fire doesn't catch well on the wick, so you might going to go ahead and the concern you'll adjust the wick. So that's what we said. Now comes the Gemara and says you could have a situation that it could be beautiful, it could be perfectly fine, that the wick draws the oil beautifully, the oil and the wick burns beautifully, but nevertheless there's a problem. What's the problem? The problem is, look at the Gemara on the bottom of 25b. It's the 25b, what number? 4 most probably? 25b. What does it say? It says, Eimad likin b'tzari. Tanya, we learned it at Brighter. Shimon Elazar Omer, Eimad likin b'tzari. You can't light with tsari. Tsari is something that has a beautiful smell. It's an oil that's very fragrant. What do they do? They call it a balsam's fragrance. What's the problem? Why can't you light with it? My time, Rabba says, 25b3, bottom of 25b3, since it has such a beautiful smell, so we're afraid, Zera Shema Istapek Mimenu. You might come to take some of the oil out on Shabbat. And therefore, since you might come take some of the oil out of, because it has such a pleasant aroma, you might be tempted by its pleasant aroma to remove some of it for its beautiful smell. And then if you remove from Shabbat, if you have a oil, let's say an oil lantern, you have this sari oil, and if you remove some of the fuel that's part of the lantern, then the light diminishes, or you're taken away from it takes away from the light, and therefore it's like extinguishing on Shabbat. So therefore, a person is not allowed to use that type of oil. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye says to him, meaning this is, the Breita just says you can't use this sari oil as a fuel. That's what the Breita says. The Breita did not tell us what's the reason why you can't use the sari oil. Rava, what says, you know what the problem with the sari oil is? Because you might come to use it and you'll be violating the prohibition of mechaber, extinguishing. Because we know the Breita says if you add oil to a lantern, it's a violation for it. That's called increasing a fire. And if you take oil away, it's called decreasing the fire. Now, So why did you say that's the reason? Amalei Abaye, Lema Ma, now we're on Vav Amar Aleph, 26a. Lema Ma, Meshu off. Because the this oil, the sari oil, when you light with it, it's so flammable that it actually, Rashi says it doesn't stick. It doesn't stay to the wick. When you light with it, it actually flies like a bird is called an oaf. Why is bird called an oaf? Because oaf, the word is the uff in it. Uff is to fly. So they say it's volatile. That's how they translate it, and therefore it could extinguish. It could cause the whole house to go on fire when you light with such it flies up. So therefore, why do you say this reason? Because you might come to take from it, which would only be a reason why you can't light it on Shabbat, because by removing some of the oil and the lantern would be taken away from the fire. And one of the malachot on Shabbat you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to, same way, you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to put out a fire on Shabbat. And by taking the oil from the lantern, you're afraid you might come to take the oil from the lantern. That's called taking out from the fire. But that only applies during the week, during Shabbat. You can't do it on Friday afternoon because we're afraid you might come to do that. But if you have a different reason, which will apply 365 days a year, like you don't want to use it because it's dangerous. Because if you use that fuel, the fire that you light on that will fly off the wick, and it might light the house. So and that's sakana that you shouldn't be used that the whole year round. Lema ma, like on certain things it says flammable. Watch out, right? So lema ma nishu off. See, because it flies off, and therefore that's why you can't use it. So the Gemara says, really, yes, Abaye, Rabba, when he says this reason, he's giving an additional reason. Meaning, Rabba is just saying like this, Chadav ha'okama. Rabba is saying there's one reason which applies all year round. And there's another reason, it's a second reason which applies for Shabbat. Chada, number one reason why, the first reason why Rabbi Shimon says you can't use this very flammable type of fuel, the sorry fuel, they show off because it flies off. What's the expression? Flying off the handle. The fire actually will not stay because the fuel is such to burn the person's house down. Therefore, you can't use. Therefore, you shouldn't use. You hear that, Ralph? That's not a good material to use. But there's another reason because for Shabbat, there's an additional reason on Friday afternoon why you can't use it. Zera Shema Yistabek Menu. Maybe you're going to go ahead and take some of the oil out. The Ritva explains the Gemara a different way. He says that the second reason is not just an additional reason. Now we have two reasons why we shouldn't do it. The second reason is, let's say you added, sometimes if you put something into the mix, if you take this sari oil, this balsam oil, if that's if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and you put some other ingredient in it, that might make it that it will not fly off the handle. It won't burn the house down, right? Let's say you calmed it down. You calm the element that it has, that it flies, that the fire flies by putting something else in it that will now tame it down. But even though you put that other thing in it, Mr. Haber, but you still has that beautiful fragrance. So therefore, Rabbah, by giving us the second reason, is adding something that would have very practical ramifications. Because if we would just say that the reason why you can't use it is because it's dangerous from a fire hazard, well, what about if you remove the fire hazard by putting something in there to calm it down? another spice that will go in and neutralize the power of the fire, that it shouldn't fly off the handle. But still, there would be a problem because of its fragrance, and we're concerned you might come to take from it on Shabbat, and that would be a violation of mechaber, extinguishing a fire on Shabbat. The Gemara now says a very tragic story. Look at that, very tragic story. He hamada dahavet snile lekalata. It seems it's been an old issue of mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and sometimes mother-in-laws do not and daughter-in-laws don't get along. And here we have something which is not acceptable. People have to work together. But this mother-in-law hated her daughter-in-law, and she actually wanted to hurt her daughter-in-law. And how did she get her daughter-in-law to be hurt? By telling her to put on this balsam, this oil that's very flammable. And she told the daughter to put this on, and the daughter-in-law listened to her mother-in-law. And then afterwards, they lit a candle, a light. And what happened was, it's so flammable, when that oil, when the fire is in the air, near that oil, it caught on fire. And she caught on fire because the oil was all over her, and she got burnt. Just want to see, yeah. So here's the story. Amrullah, she says, the mother-in-law says to the daughter-in-law, you know, adorn yourself, beautify yourself. Put on that oil of the arfarsimo oil, that sorry oil, that balsam oil. Azla ikashit, the daughter-in-law listened to her mother-in-law. He asat, and when the daughter-in-law came to her mother-in-law, Amrullah, the mother-in-law said, you know what? Okay, you know what? I think you should light the lamp. Zel itlei shraga. Go light the lamp. Azla. So the daughter-in-law listened to her mother-in-law. Nice daughter-in-law, right? She listened to her mother-in-law. Azla itla shraga. She lit the light, and in pach nura vachlata, the fire of the light was drawn to the oil that she had on her body, and she got burnt. And the daughter got burnt. Whether she got burnt up totally, that she got killed or whatever, but she got burnt. The Gemara is just illustrating the flammability of this type of fuel. So the question exactly is, what happens? Is it that we said that the fire, however the fire flies off, it's maybe the way, maybe, with having that oil and that together with that, or that balsam with that fire, it just ignites. Now here we are standing before the day before Tisha B'Av, and here we have a pasuk that describes the destruction, the exile of the Beit HaMikdash. The prophet writes on certain people were not exiled to Bavel. As you know, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. The first temple was destroyed. The Jews were exiled to Bavel, to Babylon. And it says in Yirmiyah, Umidalut Haaretz, from the poor Jews, Hishir Nivuzradin was Rav Tabachim. He was the chief executioner, terrible, terrible person. He left over the Kormim Uliyogvim. He left some of the Jewish people for Kormim V'Yogvim. Kormim V'Yogvim sounds like Kormim. These are people, Kormim is the Kerem, right? A vineyard, right? to work in the vineyards and the wineries. That would seem to be the simple meaning. And the question is, why wouldn't Vizradin leave these simple workers? He could send them to exile like the rest of the Jewish people and bring other people in there instead of them to work the vineyards in Israel. He's sending the Jews to exile. So what does it mean that he left? So why did he leave these Jews over? So rather, he left these over because these were workers that worked in a specific craft that only the Jewish people were knowledgeable, and therefore he left them over because he could not replace them by sending them to Bavel. When Hitler got rid of the scientists, right? So maybe he felt he had the Jewish scientists he got rid of, right? Einstein, the other people, right? He felt he had other people to take he had his own German scientists to take their place, right? He didn't feel he needed, and he had they built big stuff in Germany. But he felt it was rather, I don't have anyone to do the job that these people are doing. So the Gemara wants to know what is this job that they were doing. So the Gemara says is that Kormim, the word Kormim, instead of translating it like the simple meaning for the Karen people to work the vineyards, Kormim could be referred to the people that gather. These are Tani Rabbi Yosef, Elu Milaktei Afarsimon. They were the people who gathered this Afarsimon, the special fragrance that had a great smell, and they were experts in gathering this balsam from Ein Gedi Adramata. From Ein Gedi, by the way, today in Israel is a beautiful, a lot of waterfalls. Correct, Simon? It's a tourist place to go to, right? And from Ein Gedi until Ramata, and that's where they gathered it because beautiful smell. He's interested in pleasures, and he wanted to have this balsam, the smelly aroma smell, which you don't get everywhere. And therefore, that's why it was important for him to keep the Jews there, again, for his purpose, where he felt these were the ones who knew how to find the plant, gather it properly. These are experts. The other people would not be able to, he felt were able to go ahead and do the job of gathering it from these areas like these Jewish people did. And so these are great workers who know how to do the job well. And also in the Yogvim, what were the Yogvim? The Yogvim was Eilu Sayode Chalozon. These were the ones who were experts in catching the Chalozon fish. Chalozon fish is what we make the dye for the tchelet, for the blue dye. And these were the experts in catching the Chalozon from Tyre and Ad Haifa until Haifa. And therefore he left them, and you should know that blue, that royal tchelet, is a royal color. Like the kings, the royal robes, what did I say? Tezvar Gaman, right, and by Achashverosh. But by Achashverosh, you see in the Chor Tchelet, you see how they use it in different things, but whether drapings or other things, whatever, it was a very wearing it as or other types of design using that blue dye. That blue was a very royal blue, right? It's such a expression, right? So therefore that Tchelet and by the way, there was always the counterfeiters. There were people that were counterfeiters who presented that as the real deal when it wasn't the real deal. And but the real deal is the real deal. and that's the people who and therefore he kept these people around to go ahead and have the supplying him. He wanted that chelet dye for the royal robes. We got to have some beautiful dye, and therefore he left them. He left them. Um, so he left them in Eretz Israel for that purpose. Now, we just mentioned that this blue Chayla, there was always people that were in the time of the Gemara. What I recall is there were counterfeiters also on it. There were people who made, who said presented it sometimes as blue but it wasn't really Chayla. It wasn't the real deal. And we were learning yesterday in the Haftorah that in the time we're learning about the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, this Shabbat is Shabbat Chazon. It's called has a special name, correct, Simon? Why is it called Shabbat Chazon? The title of Shabbat Chazon is because the Haftorah begins with the Chazon, the vision of Yeshaya. And what one of the things that the Jewish people, that too many people in the community did wrong, was they were dishonest. They would go ahead and they would take silver, they would take copper and then coat it, and then put silver on the top, but copper in the middle, and they would present the whole thing as silver. Or they would go ahead and take wine. When a person says, I want to buy good wine, they would water it down with water and present it as this is the real deal wine, and it wasn't the real deal wine. Let's say you wanted an undiluted wine, and you were sold diluted wine. So these were some of the things, inappropriate business practices, not kosher business practices. And Hashem calls out. I mean, the Navi, the prophet, calls out. This was the part of the problem why there was a destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, lack of honesty. Okay, now continuing the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan, Ein madlikin b'tevel tamei b'chol. If you have tevel, as you understand, is that you have to take off from your crops. You have to take a certain amount. You have to take off to give to the Kohen, to the Levi, take to Yerushalayim, certain years to Jerusalem to eat, certain years to give to the poor person. So ein madlikin, let's say you have this tevel, it's produce that wasn't tithed yet. Excuse me, you're not allowed to use that produce, even though you're not eating it. You just want to burn it. And you cannot, ein madlikin b'tevel tamei. You can't use this tevel. See, now it became, it's tamei. It's tamei, it's not, it was contaminated. This crop, let's say you have a certain amount of the food that you plan on taking off ma'aseh from, which you not yet take off ma'aseh. It was contaminated. Let's say a dead mouse came in contact with it, or was in the house of a dead body. It was a dead body in the house, therefore it became contaminated. So now it's tevel, and but it still wasn't taken off from it. Now, can you go ahead? Now we know if you would use that, if you would give truma, if you take off that for truma, morning, doctor, what would be the story? The truma kohen could use truma that's tamei, that's contaminated. You could use it as fuel, like we said, right? You could use oil of truma that became contaminated as fuel. Now here we're not talking about the kohen. We're talking about the Yisrael, the owner of the crop. Never was tithed yet. It's subject to tithe, but it became contaminated. Could he use it to burn, to first personal use, to burn? So it says no. It says Ein Madlikin. We are now on 26a1, top the right of the page, second paragraph. Ein Madlikin b'tevel tamei. You cannot go ahead and use tevel that you did not take off tithes yet. You can't use it for lighting purposes for yourself. Now, the Gemara says you can't do that on the weekdays. Ve'ein tzarich loma b'Shabbat. And certainly you can't use tevel that was that's tamei for the purpose of lighting Shabbat candles. I can't use it during the weekdays, even though I'm just destroying it. I'm not eating from it, but still, even though I'm destroying the tevel, but at the end of the day, I am benefiting from it. I can't use tevel for personal use, even though it was contaminated, even though when I burn it up, but I'm still benefiting from it. I can't do that. So certainly I can't do that, use it for Shabbat. Now, the commentators ask, why is it more obvious that I can't use it for Shabbat than weekday? Meaning, what's the, I can't use it, you know, so why do we say, what would be an extra reason why I can't use this for Shabbat more than I can't use it for the weekdays? I can't use it. It seems like, why can't I use it? Because we still say that even though I am burning it, the end of the day is I'm supposed to take off my said to take off truma from this food. I can't use it for personal use. So why should Shabbat be more of a reason why I can't use it for personal use? So that's the kind of question that the Rajba asks. I think one of the commentators might say that since you did not take off, it's just a tevel, you didn't take off the types, so therefore it's definitely not appropriate to use such a thing for Shabbat. If you have something that you did not take off types from, there's more of a reason why it's like to use that item, even though you're destroying it, but to use it for Shabbat might not be appropriate. That's what somebody said. But the Rajba has that question: why is Shabbat more of a reason why I can't use it? Now, so the Gemara now, and then it says the Brisa continues: Ein malikin b'neift lavan b'chol. I can't use neift lavan. We're going to identify that's a certain type of fuel that flies. Like we spoke about this, the tsari that we spoke about earlier, very flammable stuff. So this neift lavan, I can't use this neift lavan in the weekdays. Ve'ein sarach loma b'Shabbat. And I certainly can't use this neift lavan on Shabbat. Now, if we're saying it's very flammable, so we can understand why it's more of a reason why you can't use it on Shabbat. I can't use it on the weekdays because it's dangerous. And I can't use it on Shabbat, even if I'm going to say I'm going to be on top of it. If I see it starting to be flammable, I'm going to take out the fire. But on Shabbat, I can't take out the fire. Shabbat, I can't put myself in a position that I'm going to have to take out a fire, right? I can't take out a fire. There's a prohibition taking out a fire on Shabbat. So therefore, I can't use this flammable item for Shabbat candles. Certainly I can't use it for Shabbat candles. There's two reasons why I can't use it for Shabbat: because of danger and because I might come to take out the fire. So the Gemara wants to understand Bishlama, Neish Lavan. I understand I can't use Neish Lavan by the weekdays. It's flammable stuff. Meshuaf. It's like the sari. This Neish Lavan is like this balsam oil that's very extremely flammable, and I can't use it because, well, doctor, if I use it, I might light up the house. It's flammable. Like you see on certain aerial sprays, right? Certain hairsprays, flammable, right? Don't get a fire near there. It could just, you put a fire near it, it just burns, the fire, burns up. Things go on fire. But, and therefore I understand that. What's the reason why, if the food, before I tithed it, it became contaminated, maybe why can't I go ahead and burn it and use it for lighting? So the Gemara said, because you told me if tevel, untithed produce, you told me, that became contaminated, you told me I can't burn for my personal use. So the Gemara says, Omakra. The pasuk says, Ani natati lecha et mishmeret trumatai. I've given to you the guarding. Hashem says to Aaron, you have two trumot, mishmeret trumatai. B'shtei trumot hakot medaber. It's plural. You have acha truma tahora. You have something called truma tahora, truma that is pure, belongs to the Kohen, v'acha truma tameya, and truma that's not pure also belongs to the Tamei. You know, it's yours. You have to go ahead and take care of it, burn the truma that's contaminated. You have to go ahead and eat the truma that's pure. I've given to you both truma. They both belong to you. And they're given to you. You could use the truma that's contaminated. The Kohen could use the truma that's contaminated for what? For heating purposes. He could use the oil, heating purposes, lighting purposes. But ma truma Torah is a comparison between truma, pure truma, and the non-pure truma. Ma truma Torah in lecha ela mishat haram ve'elech. When does the Kohen have a right to use the truma, which is pure? After it was separated for him and given to him. But before it was separated, before it's tevel, you have no right to it. If before it was tithe, it doesn't belong to the Kohen, and anybody would eat the food before tithe is subject to a heavenly punishment of death. The af truma tameya, truma which is not pure, the right you have to use it and burn it and benefit from it is only after it was separated and given to you, the Kohen. But before it was separated, before the truma was separated, when it was still tevel that was not pure, it is forbidden. There's no allowance of benefit. The allowance of benefit, the truma that's contaminated, is only once it was separated as truma. Before it's separated as truma, if it's in the state of tevel, it can't be used for use, and therefore you can't burn tevel food that was untithed even for heating or lighting purposes. I want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat, an easy fast for everybody. We're back on Monday. Looking forward. Take care, Ralph. All the best.
Yes, Shabbat shalom.
You too. All the best. Thank you. Shabbat to you.